All right, we are back. It is stop laughing. Stop laughing, Boone. Be a professional.
We have a lot of fun
Just
during the
'cause we
breaks. Come on. We have a lot of fun during the breaks.
we do have a lot of fun. Sometimes too much fun during the breaks, but we've got serious business to talk through here. We're back. All right. It's time to talk through the waiver wire ads here heading into week 7. As always, we go position by position, starting with quarterbacks. Boone, who are we looking at this week?
All right, I'm going to rattle off the names here and then we can talk about them. And the 4 guys I want to talk about here, Jackson Dart, somebody obviously that we've mentioned a bunch of times, no stranger to this one, CJ Stroud, Sam Darnold, and Mac Jones. And the Dart one, like, he looks fantastic out there. He looks like he has that moxie. He looks like a potential star. He's finding ways to get it done, even though he lost Malik Neighbors. Like, it's all very impressive. And he's still available in 70% of leagues. It's such a revelation for this team. I think it's one of those teams that's like really fun to watch now. And a big part of it is because of him and Cam Scatterbo. So that's awesome. And then this past week, he came through in a tough matchup against the Eagles. I bumped him down the ranks just a little bit. I think I was higher than most on him still, but I bumped him down the rankings a little lower than he normally would be. And he came through. So this week now he has to go up against the Broncos. That is a very stiff challenge, especially for a rookie. And yet, I think he's in that like low end QB1, the high end QB2 range, and he's got a pretty high floor because of the rushing ability. So you definitely want to get him if he's still out there in your league. The other guys are more streamer types, right? Like CJ Stroud, he's coming off his bye week. He's a little over that 50% mark in terms of being rostered. I normally cut them off in the article based on that, but I'm going to mention him here because he's coming off the bye. He might have been dropped in a lot of leagues. And you look at him, I mean, the QB1 overall in week 5 had that 4 touchdown outing. Before that, he was the QB 15. Maybe it's starting to come together for him a little bit. He's got the receiving core healthy. Christian Kirk out there. The rookie's starting to get a little more opportunity. The matchups were good, and the matchup this time out is a little tougher against the Seahawks, but the Seahawks have given up multiple passing touchdowns to 4 of the 6 quarterbacks that they've faced this year, including 2 top 12 weeks to the last 2 passers they've faced. So I think Stroud could be an option there. And then Sam Darnold, I just have to give him credit. This guy's playing good football. He fits in that system. He's proving me wrong. I thought he was going to struggle outside of Minnesota. He looks really good. JSN's a superstar. That helps him for sure. He's been a fantasy QB1 in 3 of his last 4 games. So even in a tougher matchup with the Texans, I think you can stream him. And then Mac Jones, it'll just come down to whether Brock Purdy's healthy or not. But if Brock Purdy's not out there, Mac Jones has shown that he can produce in that Kyle Shanahan system.
All tough matchups for these 3 guys here in week 7. Broncos for Dart, Seahawks for Stroud, Texans for Sam Darnold. If you had to start one this week, who do you think it would be?
I would go with Jackson Dart just because he did it in a tough matchup against the Eagles. And because the rushing ability, I think he's going to find a way to at least give you a fairly high floor in that game. I don't think they're going to get shut down the way the Jets got shut down this past weekend, but we'll see how that goes. Regardless, I think Dart's the guy you want to pick up, not just because he could be a streamer this week, but because he's somebody that you're going to want on your roster the rest of the season as well. He's just somebody that's shown that he can produce.
I'm very excited to watch this Giants team. You know, we'll see how good they are in the long run, but they're like, you can't take your eyes away from the Scatterbo Dart situation. So yeah, man, I'm definitely interested to watch them. And I think, if you had to start one of these quarterbacks, he'd probably be the guy. But I am very interested to see what the Texans look like off the bye. They're one of those teams that I think needs a bye, needs to reset, like investigate some things. Where can we mix in the young players? What can we do different schematically? Not they're going to trash the whole offense, but I am at least interested to see what that team looks like this week. Not sure if I'm rushing to start CJ Stroud in fantasy football. But let's flip this to the running back position. Some really, some mildly interesting names here to discuss, Boone. Let's hear it.
All right, so we have to talk about Kamani Vidal right off the jump here, right? Like, I mentioned him last week in this space. I said that he was the guy, if I was looking at somebody in that Chargers backfield, that I would want to go with him because if he got the lead back job, he had the higher ceiling. And I also admitted that we didn't really know how it was going to play out. And yet Vidal definitely ran away with that job, had a huge game. So he leads off everything. He is the top ad overall this week. Bam Knight is another one, and we got that Schefter report on Sunday morning that Bam Knight would get the start, and yet that did not turn out to be the case. It was still Michael Carter. It was more of a split, though, this week, and Bam Knight found the end zone, so he ended up having a pretty productive day there. Tajay Spears is somebody we mentioned. We were talking about the Titans. I think he's a guy that could come on as the season goes along here. And yes, the ceiling might not be huge, but if Tony Pollard were to get traded, if something were to happen in that offense where Spears starts to get a little more work when they're trailing, and that was why I think he got more work this week than Pollard, when they're trailing, they tend to lean on him a little more. I bet this team is going to be trailing in a lot of games. So Spears, somebody that could give you a little bit of flex value out there. And then we're going for like a deep stash, a guy that also would probably need a trade to have immense fantasy value. But Isaiah Davis on the Jets, Breece Hall, his name has been out there in trade rumors for a while, even dating back to the summer. If that eventually happens, we know that Braylon Allen is out for 8 to 12 weeks. So who's going to be the guy that would step up in the event of a trade, in the event of an injury? It would be Isaiah Davis in that offense. So those are the four I think we're looking at here. Vidal obviously is the one that I think if he's still out there. I had some people, when I put out my waiver wire article this afternoon, I had some people going like, he's obviously rostered in every league. No, he's not actually. He's still available in almost 70% of leagues. And there's a few reasons for that, right? One, that there's a lot of leagues that are more shallow. So I hate when people send messages like that to my waiver wire column saying like, oh, but all these guys are rostered. Click on the waiver wire column. I promise you, I have plenty of guys in there that are 0% rostered. There will be somebody for you, no matter how deep or how shallow your league is. So check out that full column. And then the other thing was, a lot of people last week thought that Hassan Haskins, especially even based on the reports as we got closer to the weekend, that Hassan Haskins was going to get the start and be the guy. And yet it was so evident from the jump that Kamani Vidal was the more explosive option, was the more productive back. And we saw him just have a massive game, right? 67% of the snaps, 21 touches, 138 scrimmage yards, and a score. This is like best case scenario because it was an easy matchup. And we don't know that it's going to continue to be the case like this. There was talk that they might go out and trade for somebody, but I think a performance like that from Vidal probably delays that a little bit, and they'll let him potentially come out for another couple games and see what he can do if he can match that performance. Though I will say too, the latest that we got on O'Marion Hampton was that he's going to be out probably for more than the 4 weeks than the minimum on IR. So that's a little bit scary. And that potentially makes you want to bid a little higher to get Vidal this week, because if he can keep this up, he could give you some value for maybe more than 4 to 6 weeks.
So where do you think you'll be ranking Kamani Vidal this week? Because I think that might help people sort of decide what to do with him. The 70% of leagues out there where he is not rostered. So yes, we're so proud of you, all of you that play in the real competitive leagues where Kamani Vidal is not on your waivers. We're very proud of you. But for the 70%, the vast majority of people out there who don't have him rostered in their leagues right now, that might help them sort of decide what to do and like how to approach him on waivers.
I'm looking at him as a high-end RB3. But I do think he still has, like he showed last week, that RB2 upside, that much higher ceiling if he comes through for you. And remember what happened with the Cardinals backfield. This can change week to week depending on the hot hand, depending on the matchup. These are not like proven guys. This is not a situation where you have a backup that is an obvious guy who's going to step in and take over. This is a backfield where even last week, I admitted we weren't sure the way it was going to go. So yeah, you can't be that confident week to week, but having him come out, put up that kind of production, it's going to give him a chance to get more touches next week. And that's why he would be the guy that would be ranked much higher, where Hassan Haskins didn't really give you much at all in the last game. But I think that also ties in well to the Bam Knight thing, where Bam Knight, he did find the end zone. Michael Carter only rostered in 55% of leagues, so Michael Carter might still be out there. I think both of those guys are flex options, because you look at the way it got distributed for them last week. 51% of the snaps tonight, even though he didn't get the start, 12 touches, 54 yards, and a TD. Carter, 44% of the snaps, 11 touches, 64 yards. So could something like that happen in the Chargers backfield where it ends up a lot closer than it was last week? Absolutely. I will say Kamani Vidal, far more effective than Michael Carter was 2 weeks ago. So I don't think there's as much reason to get someone else involved, but the Chargers backs, they're more just flex options. We don't know how that's going to go, and their matchups are a little tougher as well as they move forward.
Yeah, couldn't have been an easier spot for one of these Chargers backs against the Dolphins run defense, which Dolphins are kingmakers right now at the running back position. So obviously you see your running back go against the Dolphins, you're getting your expectations up. And just one last thing before we throw to break here on this whole Kamani Vidal Bam Knight thing. I try to tell people this all the time, but with fantasy football, like, and some of the reporting around like, oh, this running back's going to be the guy. I feel like people try to approach this as if these are predetermined outcomes, as if like the coaches know how the guys are going to play in game. Like these are not numbers on a spreadsheet. These are people playing the game. So they might have felt like there's a very real chance that the Chargers felt and told one of the reporters on Friday or Saturday, yeah, we feel pretty good about Hassan Haskins, like, being our guy going into this because, the coaching staff knows him. Harbaugh's got familiarity with him. And then, like, they see Kamani Vidal looking great in warmups or on his first touch of the game. Like, oh, yeah, you know what? Let's ride the hot hand. Like, when you're approaching any of these backfield situations, I just saw a lot of people getting frustrated with, like, the reporting of this. The reporters are they're getting information and they're telling it to you. You then decide what to do with that. That's fantasy football, that's sports betting, and like those reporters don't know, just like the teams don't know going into it how these things are actually going to play out once we get into game day. So there's always some level of caution with those players in particular.
Yeah, for sure. Like there's some backfields where it is clear, and a guy like Tajay Spears, if Tony Pollard goes down, Tajay Spears is going to be the lead back in that backfield, and he's probably not going to be challenged very much by anybody else they have. And yet when it's a backfield like this where we're not even down one running back in these backfields.
Yeah, we're to the third string.
Chargers and the Cardinals, we're down to like third, fourth string guys. So yeah, it's not as clear who's going to get the most snaps. And yeah, I hope that people followed the waiver wire column, and I hope that people follow what we were talking about last week and went out and got Kamani Vidal. And yet, we'll see how it goes moving forward, but he is certainly the top pickup this week. And I'd be willing to spend up based on the fact that it sounds like Hampton's going to miss more than 4 weeks.
Yeah, we're reading again in 2025, and you are reading Justin Boone's waiver wire column every single week. We are going to take our last break. When we come back, we'll talk through wide receivers and tight ends on the waiver wire right after this. All right, we are back once again, not having any fun during our breaks, that's for sure. We've got some serious business, though, here to talk through. These are the wide receivers and tight ends to pick up off the waiver wire, starting with, we got an update on Garrett Wilson in the middle of the show here. Garrett Wilson, hyperextended knee after the MRI. That is the diagnosis. He is expected to miss, quote, a couple of weeks, according to Adam Schefter. So, Boone, with that, perfect time to dip into the wide receivers on the waiver wire for the week.
Yeah, don't be surprised. There are no Jets here, even though Garrett Wilson is expected to miss some time because, like we said earlier, Josh Reynolds is still just a risky flex play in that offense, even though he profiles to be the number one there. Some guys here who I think are interesting, but again, they're all just kind of like wide receiver 3 flex plays, depending on some of the injuries in their offenses. We'll start with Kendrick Bourne on the 49ers. 2 huge games from him, over 140 yards 2 weeks in a row, but it's going to come down for him to whether Juwan Jennings is going to be out there with all the injuries that he's been dealing with, whether Ricky Pearsall can get back this week. He hasn't even practiced yet, so we'll see if he can get on the practice field and what that could mean. If those guys are out, then we're looking at Kendrick Bourne as a really strong wide receiver 2 who has that wide receiver 1 upside. If one of those guys is back, I think you could still play Kendrick Bourne as a wide receiver 3 option. And if the guy who's back is just Juwan Jennings, then I think you're looking at Kendrick Bourne as the number 1 receiver in that offense still. The Bucs injuries, man, it is just so awful that we're down to Sterling Shepard and Tez Johnson and Cameron Johnson. But that is where this is at. 5% rostered, 1% rostered, 0% rostered. I don't think you can feel great about any of them in your fantasy lineup, but Sterling Shepard being the veteran guy, I think we both like Sterling Shepard as a talent. I think he would be the one that I'd be most willing to play. I think he would get the most opportunity, the most targets. The other guys, you're just hoping for those big plays, those deep shots down the field, and they're kind of like riskier plays because of that. So all those guys, we'll see where Mike Evans stands this week, if he can come back or not. But as I mentioned before, and we'll talk about him in a second, Cade Otton at tight end, I think, has a chance to be the de facto number 1 receiver out of that group this week. Josh Downs, Harmon, he's finally doing something. Josh Downs,
let's go.
Having some good performances here, right? Are we happy to see this? And he's still just playing 50% of the snaps, so we can't get too excited. But the offense is humming. At least 7 targets in 3 of his last 5 games, at least 50 yards and or a touchdown in 3 of those weeks. We know he has the talent. He's been coming through. That's good to see. I think you can go out and get him. He's rostered in almost 50% of leagues, but if he's out there, you could grab him. Jalen Coker, we don't need to spend any time on. I've talked about him like 3 or 4 weeks in a row. You go pick him up. He practiced in full last week. They didn't activate him from IR. Can he come back and be that number 2 option in the Panthers passing attack? I certainly think that he can. And then the deep guy at receiver who we talked about earlier, Jordan Whittington on the Rams. Can he step in with Puka out? Can he give you 70% of Puka's production, 60%? We would take it, right? If you get that from him, that makes him a flex play in that offense. So Jordan Whittington, a guy who is 0% rostered right now. He's available in all leagues, and I think you could grab him and you could put him in your lineup.
Yeah, just doubling back on the Josh Downs point, he leads the team in targets over the last 3 weeks with 20, 16 catches for 120 yards and a touchdown in that span. They're really finding ways now to weaponize his separation ability in some of these isolated looks. They've given him some more run on the outside. Now he's mostly been a slot guy, but the last couple of weeks he has played a little bit more on the outside. So in some of the 2 receiver sets, or he starts as the outside guy, they kick a guy out in full speed motion, he becomes the slot. And again, that really like on his touchdown, that's exactly what they did, where then he becomes weaponized as that interior player in man coverage. Is he going to be a must start every single week? No, but because of that usage, as you mentioned, he's been targeted on 35% of his routes the last 2 weeks. He's very, very good. So he's somebody I think you can at least play, and it's not embarrassing right now. But yeah, still definitely going to have a cap ceiling with that playing time. But I like all these receiver recommendations. It's a pretty good week to chase some wide receivers, especially the Jalen Coker of it all. I'm very interested to see what he looks like. But all right, unless you got anything else on these receivers, we can move to tight ends here.
No, I know you love talking receivers, but we got to keep going here so we don't run out of time. Let's talk about tight ends quick. Harold Fannin Jr., we saw David Njoku leave the game multiple times with a knee injury. I've already talked about Harold Fannin Jr. before, what he could do. He's a playmaker out there. Saw him get a ton of work this week. 81% of the snaps, finished with an impressive 81 yards on 7 receptions. He can be that tight end 1 if Njoku misses time. Cade Otton, who I just said during the receiver section, we saw him have his best games last year when they had injuries to the receiver core. The injuries are back. We've seen him come out and put up big days the last 2 weeks. I think he would be a top 12 tight end if those guys are going to miss this week. Michael Mayer in a very similar situation. If Brock Bowers can't play, Michael Mayer for the Raiders also in the conversation as a tight end 1 for fantasy. And he went out and had a pretty good day, 5 for 50 and a touchdown on 7 targets in week 6. And then keep stashing Isaiah Likely. Mark Andrews trade rumors out there. We saw Isaiah Likely's playing time really go up this week. There's a chance that he takes over that job. There's a chance that Andrews gets traded or gets hurt. There could be opportunity for Likely coming down the road.
Fannin's a guy that's just going to get a bunch of targets with Dylan Gabriel under center because that guy cannot or will not, some combination of both, push the ball down the field. So Harold Fannin with no David Njoku, I think, will be a must start. I wouldn't be surprised at all if Cade Otton or Michael Mayer are maybe not ranked as tight end 1s, but finish as tight end 1s this week, especially Michael Mayer, as long as Brock Bowers is not out there, man. I mean, he's a good player. Like he would be, I think he could start at tight end for a handful of other teams. So Boone, I think of all those guys there, Mayer real quick is the one that, again, it's probably not as automatic as Harold Fannin, but I definitely might end up ranking him as a tight end 1 this week.
Yeah, I really like that call. And then a super deep sleeper we always give every week, Phil Maffa on the Cowboys. I know you don't want me to say, you don't want me to make producer Colin happy, but Jaden Blue is out there struggling. He struggled to get on the field. He hasn't done anything with his opportunities. Phil Maffa was a player who the coaching staff seemed to like before the season. I think he's a guy that you could go out and stash right now, could eventually end up as the number 2 in that backfield.
Yeah, in your Cowboys only fantasy football league, Phil Maffa is a great pickup. No question about it. Right after you spend, unless you didn't spend all your fab on Ryan Flournoy the week before, I think you can, in your Cowboys only fantasy football league, you can go ahead and pick up Phil Maffa there. So shout out to you, Boone.